Hi everyone, I'm Bo. I run the Blau Dev channel on YouTube, and today we're going to be going over how to create a full stack Flutter application utilizing Firebase authentication and Firebase Firestore along with some open sourced APIs. For this project, we're going to have 4 key parts that we're going to be setting up. Firebase setup, Flutter setup to integrate with Firebase, we're going to build our Flutter application, and last we're going to hook up our APIs to our application as well as Firestore to our application. By the end of this video, you should be able to hook up APIs into your Flutter application and utilize them. You should be able to utilize Firebase authentication in your app at a more basic level, and you should be able to perform CRUD operations using Firestore in your Flutter application. So those are the main goals that we're going to focus on today. To accomplish these goals, we're going to be building a cryptocurrency wallet app. We're going to be able to add coins and how much of that coin a user has to the wallet. We're going to be able to read the current value converted into US dollars of that wallet. And we're going to allow the users to sell or remove coins from their wallet. And this basic functionality is going to allow us to practice using our APIs, using Firestore, and using Firebase authentication. I'd like to thank FreeCodeCamp for this awesome opportunity. Make sure to subscribe to their channel below by clicking that subscribe button. And if you're interested, there'll be a link to my channel in the description as well. For this project, we're going to be using VS Code as our main editor. I'm going to assume that you've probably already done a Flutter application or two before this video. If you haven't, that's okay. You can follow along and build this out as we go. If you're new to Flutter development, that's okay. Be sure to check out flutter.dev and then follow their steps for setting up your machine to use Flutter. In this case, we're going to be using VS Code and utilizing some of their Flutter extensions in our project. The key one being Awesome Flutter, Flutter, and Dart language support. The first thing we need to do is set up Firebase to work with our application. But before we can do that, we need to create a project first so that we can hook it up to Firebase. To do this, we're going to open up our command prompt in VS Code, and we're going to select Flutter New Project. For this project, we're going to call it Crypto Wallet. And then I'm just going to place it on my desktop. Once your app's finished building, we're going to go over to Firebase, and you're going to go to firebase.google.com, and we're going to click Get Started. And all we're going to do is follow the prompts for creating a new project. So I'm going to call mine Crypto Wallet. I'm going to enable Google Analytics. Select my default analytics account. Once it's finished building, you'll get a page like this, and we'll click Continue. This is your Firebase dashboard. This is where we're going to manage everything that we're going to be using with Firebase, from authentication to our Firestore hookups and to setting up the connections to our mobile app. The first thing we want to do is we want to configure Firebase to connect to our Flutter application. To do this, we're going to click on iOS. There's one field that we need to incorporate in order to hook up our iOS side of our app to Firebase, and that's our bundle identifier. To find your bundle identifier, you're going to go into your Flutter application in Xcode. If you're developing on a Mac, you want to make sure you open up Xcode. We're going to go to our iOS folder, and we're going to select the white icon, runner.xc workspace, not workproj. We're going to open it. We're going to click on our runner. And under General, you're going to see here we have our bundle identifier. And we're simply going to copy this and paste it into Google. Alternatively, another way to find your bundle identifier is by opening up the iOS folder, runner.xcode project, project.pbxproj, and then you're going to search for bundle. And you're going to see here, there's a variable called product bundle identifier, and that is the name of the bundle ID that you want to use. So if you're not using Mac, or alternatively, you just don't want to open Xcode, you can go to this file and grab the product bundle identifier and use that instead. We're going to select Register App. We are going to download the config file. I'm just going to drag it to my desktop. Next, we can skip this step. We can skip this step, as that is specific to Swift. And we can skip the verify. The next piece we want to do is we want to make sure we add the Android side to our app. Now this is going to be similar, but the package name is going to be slightly different. So you'll see here, they suggest you go to your app level, Android app, build.gradle, and right near the top, you'll see under default config, an application ID. And this is going to be our package name. I'm going to copy that. We're going to paste it here. Register that app. Download the config file. And unlike the iOS side, we are going to follow the instructions listed in the following extra tasks. So the first one it tells us to do is go to our project folders build.gradle file, and we are going to add in the following line. When it means project level, it means the Android root folder. And we're simply going to add this right here in our dependencies under our build script. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to navigate to our app, build.gradle, and we're going to copy the supply plugin line. And paste it right here with the other apply plugins. And then we're going to get under dependency, we're going to add Firebase Analytics because we've got that enabled. And there we go. Everything's set up for Android. Skip that step. And the last thing we want to do is in our project, we want to make sure we add in our new Google files that we downloaded, our config files, our one for iOS and our one for Android. For iOS, what we're going to do is you're going to navigate to your runner folder, the same folder where you find your info.plist, and that's where we're going to place our file. Quick side note, if you're building on iOS and run into an issue where it can't find the Google plist file that we recently downloaded from Firebase, don't worry, there's a quick fix to it. Go into Xcode, right-click on Runner, click Add Files to Runner, and then you're going to want to select the Google Service Info plist that we recently downloaded. Add it, there you go. And now you shouldn't get this issue anymore. The Android Google file should be placed right within this app folder. Okay, we have two more very simple steps to follow to finish our Firebase setup. The first that we want to do is we want to set up authentication. For this application, we're going to set up a sign-in method of email and password. And we're just going to check the top box. And that's it. Now we can hook up our app to Firebase authentication. The next thing we want to do is we want to go to Cloud Firestore, click Create Database, and we're going to start it in test mode. What test mode is, it's going to allow any read and write abilities to this database, but it's going to place a timestamp on it. We're going to use this for our testing, and once we're ready to deploy into production, we're going to change it to production mode and modify the rules. Next, we're going to select a region. Since I'm on the East Coast of the US, but I anticipate a lot of West Coast users as that's where a lot of family and friends are, I'm going to keep it on US Central. And there we have it. We've officially set up our Firebase console to manage our Flutter application. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to quickly clean up the Flutter application in our main.dart file. I'm going to remove the theme data. I'm going to simplify this class below the homepage class, remove a title from its implementation, and then I'm going to clear out most of the contents of the clear state class. I'm going to clear out everything within scaffold and only have a body of type container. Remove this title. Okay, and I'm going to remove this unused method. Okay, I'm officially ready to start my Flutter application. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install the packages necessary to talk with Firebase from our Flutter application. So let's go ahead and do that next. The first thing we need to do is we need to go to our pubspec.yaml file, and underneath the dependencies, this is where we're going to put our Flutterfire dependencies. The first dependency we want to add is authentication. So we're just going to copy straight from the firebase.flutter.dev documentation, and we're going to paste it into our app. And this will give us the most recent version available on Flutterfire. Next up, we're going to go down to Cloud Firestore and do the same thing, except we don't need to copy in Firebase Core as we already did that with authentication. Okay. Upon saving, VS Code should run pub-get. If not, you need to open up your terminal and run flutter pub-get. That way, it imports it into your application. And that's it. That was the most difficult part about connecting with Firebase. Everything from here on out is going to be a breeze. So with that, let's go ahead and build out our Flutter application. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shell out all the files that I know I'm going to need in anticipation of having to create them anyways. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to create a couple folders, one called model, one that I'm going to call net, and the other that I'm going to call UI. And I'm going to go ahead and create a file called authentication. And what we're going to do here is we're going to have a single file that handles our authentication. There'll be two fields. There'll be an email field, a password field, and we'll have both a login and a register button. So regardless of what the user is intending to do, whether sign up or sign in, they can do it all from that same page. The next two files that I know I'm going to need are my Flutterfire functions file and my API functions file. So I'm going to go ahead and create those in my net folder. And lastly, I know I'm going to have one model class at least, which is going to contain my coin class. For the time being, we're only going to mess with our authentication file, and we'll come back to these other ones later on. We're going to first import material, and then we're going to create a stateful widget. And that's going to be called authentication with a capital A. It's important to note that file names are always lowercase letters with underscores in between words, and your classes are always uppercase, camel case. So the first letter in each new word is uppercase, and the rest are lower. I'm then going to add just a simple container, and I'm going to make the container a material. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete the class from the main file. I should have just done that to begin with. And instead of my home page being the file that we're going to return, we're going to return authentication. One more thing that we want to make sure that we incorporate into our application is instantializing our Firebase hookup. So right at the very start, we're going to call await firebase.initializeApp, and we're going to do this right inside our main. We're going to then import Firebase Core, make this main method asynchronous, and we're off to the races. So we're first going to focus all on the UI of our authentication page. So let's go ahead and do that. The first thing we want to do is we want to give our container a width of media query .size.width, and we're going to give it a height of media query.ofcontext.size.height. What this will do is it'll expand the container to fill the screen's max width and max height, so it'll fill the entire screen. We're then going to add a decoration of type box decoration, and this is going to allow us to modify the colors, if you want to add bordering to any containers, if you want to add any additional styling, you'll always use a decoration to do this. So I'm going to say colors dot, let's do a blue accent for now. Add a comma for some, there we go. And we're going to add a child of type text. That's just going to say hello world. The last thing we're going to do before we start up this app is we are going to add widgets flutterbinding.ensure initialized. This is a method we need to add if we're going to initialize the application in our main method. Now that all the setup is done, we're going to go back to our authentication file and we're going to get to work on our authentication page. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make this a scaffold that it's going to be returning, which takes a type body. So we had it as material. That was the default that the class builder object created, but we want it to be of type scaffold for this root container. And then instead of hello world, we are going to have a column. And the reason for this is we want to display two fields, an email form field, a password form field, and then we want to have two buttons, and they're all vertical. So there's nothing to the left or right, it's just up and down. And so a column is going to allow us to place all of those vertically positioned from each other. So the first one we have is a text form field. And this is going to be for our email. We're going to have another text form field. For our password, we are going to have a, let's just do it inside of a container for our buttons. Okay, and we're going to start filling these out. So what we need to do is, since we're doing a text form field, we need to have a controller that can capture the input that the user puts into the form. So to do this, we need a text editing controller. And we're going to call this one email field. And it's going to be equal to a text editing controller. And then we're going to repeat the same thing for password. We're just going to call it password instead of email field. So password field. And these are going to be the values that we're going to pass to our method when the user clicks login or register. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add these controllers to our text form fields that we just created. So for the top one, it's the email controller. And for the bottom one, it's the password. The next thing we want to do is we want to make sure the user feels secure when they're entering their password. So we don't want to just show the password for anyone to see. We just want them to be able to see it one letter at a time. And so what we're going to do for that is there's a method here called obscure text. It's a property on text form field, and it takes in a Boolean input. So by simply saying true, what will happen is when the user's typing in, it'll block out all the previously typed characters. So that's the kind of action that we want to have. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to give these a decoration. So I believe text input decoration, no, input decorate, that's the one, input decoration. And you can see even I struggle with this, having done it hundreds of times. Don't feel bad if you have to Google something or if you have to mess around with it a little bit in order to find the field that you're really looking for. So for input decoration, this is going to allow us to change things such as the hint or the label associated with the field, styling for the input text form field. It's going to allow us to manipulate all of these different things. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a hint text, and it'll be something, let's just say email.com. The next thing that we want to change is we want to add a label. For label text, we'll just call it email. And for label style, it takes in a text style input. And we're going to say colors.white. Okay. And we're going to do the same thing for hint style. We're going to say text style color is colors.white. Okay. And by putting a trailing comma like this, the Dart formatter will format our code for us. And I think that's all we want to do for this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually copy this decoration. We're going to come down to password, and we're going to paste it. And we're just going to replace the label to say password. And for this one, we're just going to say password for the hint. And kind of going back up to the top really quick, we've got a background of this light blue. We can keep it at that. We've made the form fields have a white text. So just be aware of the colors you're using. We're not going to style this a ton. Again, we're just trying to get some basic functionality so that we can get into the real nitty-gritty of the API methods and working with Firestore, but this will serve our purpose for now. In our containers, we need to give them first a decoration, and we're going to give them a box decoration. And the reason why we wanted to give them a box decoration is I want to create some white buttons with rounded borders. And to do that, using a box decoration, we can easily say border radius dot circular and give them a nice rounded border. Okay. And then we can say color is equal to colors dot white. The last thing we need to do is we need to give it a width, which we can say media query dot of context dot size dot width divided by 1.4. And again, what media query does is it gives us the width of the screen, and it allows us to basically say, okay, no matter what kind of device you're using, I want to give back a width based on the size of that device. So it'll be unique to each device, and this way it'll format nicely no matter what device it's being used on, whether it's an iPad or an iPhone or a Google Pixel. No matter what kind of device it is, it'll format it nicely. And then we want to just give it a height of, let's just say 40. 45. Let's do 45. And then it's going to have a child of material button, which will have an onPress method, which for now we're going to leave blank. And material button will have a child of type text, which will say register. We'll put register on top. And we are going to actually just copy this container and use it for login. And all we need to do is change this to login, and we're good to go. Going back to our main, let's click run. Open up my simulator here so you guys can see. We're going to wait for it to build. Okay, once that's built, you should get something similar to this screen. Now, the formatting of this is really ugly, but you have seen that the padding on the sides of the buttons is about what we wanted. So to resolve the issue of everything being pushed right at the top, we're going to go to our column, and we're going to say main axis alignment dot space between. Actually, let's do space evenly. And again, we don't care too much about how things look. We're going more for functionality. So putting space between, or space evenly, it puts an equal amount of spacing and padding between each item. So we've got email, password, register button, login button. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to test this out. There we go. Okay. Those are working as expected. And we are going to go ahead and check. Okay, buttons are functioning as expected. The next thing we need to do is we need to create our authentication methods to sign a user in and sign a user up. So we're going to go over to our Firebase file. Let's go to our Flutterfire. And we're going to create two methods. The first one is going to be a future type void, and it's going to be called sign in. And that's going to take a string of email and a string of password. And the second one is going to be similar. It's going to be called register. So what we're going to do for our register method is we're going to do a try catch. And for the catch, I'm actually going to just paste in this exception handling for Firebase. So you'll see here, Firebase auth exception, quick fix, import that. Okay, let's put a space between these methods for clarity. In this try statement, we're going to say await Firebase auth dot instance dot create user with email and password, to which we're going to pass in our email. Oh my goodness. And we're going to pass in our password here. Okay. So let's go over what's going on right here. So we're going to create an instance of Firebase authentication. And this has a bunch of different methods that we can access and we can utilize, such as signing the user in, verifying email. There's a lot of different methods associated with Firebase authentication. The one we are interested in, however, is creating a user with an email and password, as that is the method that we set up on Firebase. And all we have to do is pass an email and password. If it's successful, things will go on, it'll complete, and we can enter the application just fine. If, however, it throws an error, then we know we don't want to route the user, and it'll throw one of these exceptions right here. It'll just print it to the console. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to change this to a type of string response. Actually, let's change it to a bool. And what we'll do is if it's successful, we can return true. And if it's unsuccessful, we'll just return false. So we'll just say return false, and we'll say return false after it prints out those logs. Now, ideally, we would handle these exceptions and display the validation error that's occurring. And in an even more ideal situation, you would probably use the provider package or some other kind of state management to set up your authentication in a very smooth, clean way if you were to publish this app. This will work for our purposes. It's totally fine. Nothing's going to break. It'll serve our purpose, so we're going to continue with this. And the way that this is going to work is we are simply going to say when the user registers, so that's this one. Let me put a comma after here for some formatting clarity. We are going to make this an asynchronous method, and we are going to say bool should navigate is equal to await register, and we're going to pass to it our email field dot text and our password field dot text, and it's probably going to prompt us to import that one file. Okay, and then what we're going to say is we're going to say if should navigate which we'll get to here in a minute, else. Actually, we don't even need an else. For now, nothing will happen. If you press it, we'll just say nothing happens. And we're going to just copy this because we're going to be doing something similar with our login. So in login, we're going to do the same thing, except it will be sign in. And this will be asynchronous as well. And going back to our Flutterfile file, we're going to change this to a type of Boolean for sign in. And there we go, that's resolved. Now we still need to build out the sign-in method, so let's go ahead and do that. Again, we're going to do a try-catch statement. And in this one, I'm just going to put catch E for error. And we're going to say print E, return false if it's unsuccessful. And we're going to try to do await Firebase auth.instance.sign in with email and password. And then we have our email, and then we have our password. If this feels like I'm going too fast, feel free to pause, slow down, or even check out the code. I always put this code public on my GitHub page, and so if you'd like to check that out as well so you can follow along better, by all means, please do that. And it's still upset here because we haven't put a return statement for inside the try. So if it successfully hits this line, that means no error was thrown when it signed the user up. Therefore, we can return true and let the authentication page know, hey, you're good to go. Now that we've shelled out our authentication page, let's create one more new view that we're going to use after authentication, which we're just going to call home view. And I'm going to make this a stateful widget called home view. For child, I'll just do a text with home view. As that text, we're going to need to import material. There we go. I'm going to close that out. I'm going to remove these files that we're not using, and we're going to focus purely on the authentication, routing to the home view. So what we're going to do is we're going to say navigator.push, and this is going to take two parameters, one of context and the other of material page route. Material page route has a builder method we're going to be using. We're going to say context, and then we're going to say home view. So that is where we want to go. Okay. Add in home view. Let's add on some trailing commas here for formatting's sake. Okay. And I'm going to copy this navigator.push method. I'm going to place it under register as well. So if we successfully registered the user or logged them in, we should push and display our new page that we want to go to. And what home view is going to be is it's going to be where we contain all of our methods for adding coins, removing coins, and viewing the current value of our coins. Going to start it up so we can see if it's working and we can test with Firebase. So let's go ahead and see if this works. And if we have time, we'll come back to this and we will make it a little bit better, a little bit cleaner looking. So I'm going to type in an email. I'm going to give it a very simple password. I'm going to say register, and we've successfully gone into our home view. Now you may be wondering, why is it a black screen with these double underlines? And the reason for that is we currently are returning a type of container. What we want to do is make this of type material. I'm going to hot reload that page, and now you'll see that we have our white background like we're expecting, and the home view in the top left corner. And actually what we're going to do is we're going to make this, instead of material widget, let's make it a scaffold widget. And the reason for this is we want to use a floating action button to show the add button. And scaffold has a nice built-in property for floating action buttons. So we're going to do that instead. And in place of the body, we're going to place a container. Let's give the container a width of media query .of context .size.width. We want it to fill the space of the entire screen. And for height, we are going to do the same, but instead of width, I'm going to say .height. And let's go ahead and give it a decoration, box decoration. And let's do colors.white. And then for child, we can do our text, hello world. So before we go ahead and create the add and remove methods to connect to Firestore, let's go ahead and shell out the UI for our home view. So in place of this text widget, what we're instead going to do is we're going to create a stream builder widget. And stream builders have two parts, the stream and what you want to do with the data that you get from the stream. So to set up the stream, we're going to say stream, and then we're going to say Firebase Firestore.instance.collection. And what we're doing right now is we're creating a path to the specific collection that we want to be listening to and watching. And so we're creating a path to that and setting it as our stream. Users.doc. The name of the document that we want to reference is Firebase auth.instance.currentUser.uid. And then it's going to be a collection under that user called coins. And then we say .snapshots. Okay. Scrolling back to the left. Okay, so this is the stream that we have set up. We're basically going to tell the user to be, or tell the stream builder to be looking at the user doc of the currently authenticated user, and then to check out any documents under the collection coins, and that's where we're going to be storing all the coins that the user has. And so what we're trying to do with the stream builder is display a list of all the different coins that the user has and the most recent pricing and value of the coins that that user has. And so the next part that we're going to do is we're going to add our builder aspect. And the builder is going to have a couple of variables. It's going to have a build context of context. And we're going to have an asynchronous snapshot of type query snapshot called snapshot. Okay. And let's see, did I spell this right? Async snapshot. Oh, I missed an S. That's why it was not working for me. So a little confused there for a minute. Okay, so these are the two arguments that it's taking. And what we're going to do is we're going to say if not snapshot.hasData, return centered a circular progress indicator. So what this will do is, in the case that, let me put a comma here for formatting, in the case that it is still trying to read in the data, or it's been unable to process it quite yet, it hasn't quite gotten the data, it is going to return a circular progress indicator, which will just keep on spinning until it gets data. Then what we're going to do is, outside of this if statement, we're going to have a list view that we're going to render that displays all the data, because if we've passed over this if statement, we know that the snapshot does have data, so then we can do something with it. So we're going to say return list view. And the list view is going to have children of type snapshot dot data dot docs dot map, and we're going to map those to a variable called document. Okay, we're almost there. And after it, we want to say .toList. So we're going to list them out. Okay, yes. And then what we're going to do is, inside of here, we're going to say return container, and the container is going to have, let's say, a row element or a row widget, and it's going to have two children. We're going to have coin, we'll call it coin name. And then for the second one, we'll call it amount owned. And this may all seem a little confusing at first, but here in a second, it's all going to come together and make sense. And we're going to give this row main axis alignment of, let's do space evenly. Okay, so let's discuss what's going on here. So we've already talked about how if we passed over this if statement, that means we have data. So what we're doing is, with that data, we are taking that data, and what it is it's a list of documents found in Firestore. So what we're going to do is we're going to map them out, and we're basically going to have this list view iterate through each document. And with each document, we're going to create and return a container. And what we're going to do here is we're going to display right here. We'll do it right now so we can see this. So we're going to do some string interpolation here, and we're going to say document.id. And the reason I'm saying this is because we're going to store the name of the coin in the ID of the document. So if you remember us talking about this, we're going to limit how many types of coins the user can actually utilize. And so because of this, we're just going to store the name of the name of the coin that the user has as the identifying value of the document. And then what we're going to do here, this is going to be a little bit more complex, because what we have to do under amount owned is we need to take so there's a value that we're going to be storing. It'll be document.data, and then it's going to be called amount. But that's not the only value that we need to display here. We need to multiply this by the current price of the coin on the market. And so we're going to have to create, we'll probably do it in the onInit state class, onInit state method in this class. But we're going to have to fetch the current price of each coin. And then what we'll do here is we'll basically say, okay, take the amount of that coin they have. So let's say they have one Tether coin. And let's say Tether's worth $5. I believe it's worth 1, but for this example, we'll say 5. We don't want to display 1 here. We want to display $5 because that's how much that user owns of Tether. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to have some business logic and a fun activity. If you feel like this isn't complex enough for you or you want to take it a step further, rework this whole project, but utilize block, provider, river pods, utilize some other kind of state management process so that you can perform the business logic in a much cleaner fashion. We're going to do it here, but it's going to be pretty rudimentary just so we can show how to access APIs, how to interact with Firestore. That's our main focus. But if you want to challenge yourself and take this a step further, try to implement some state management, a more effective, cleaner solution to state management into your example. That's not the focus of this video, however, so we're going to go past that. So this is the general idea. For now, I'm going to keep it as this. Remember, we said we're going to work out the UI first, and then we'll come back to hooking everything up to Firestore and to the API. So let's leave it like that for now. And the next thing we need to do is let's find our scaffold. Let's see here. Here's our scaffold. So we want to add a floating action button. And what the floating action button is going to be is it's going to route us to a new page where the user can add in new coins. And the floating action button is going to basically be our clean, simple way of the user adding additional coins to the list. And the reason why, going back to the stream builder, that we want to utilize the stream builder is that when we do an action, like adding in a new value, the stream builder will pick up the changes live from Firestore and immediately render them in the view. So we don't have to constantly be checking, hey, do you have more data? Hey, do you have more data? Hey, do you have more data? The stream's just going to say, hey, I noticed a change in Firestore. Let's update the UI. So that's why we're doing a stream builder here. Okay, for the floating action button, we're going to have 2 bits. We're going to have, so let's create the floating action button. We need to have an onPress method, which is where we're going to route to that new file, which we're going to call addView. And that's going to have our drop down with the different options of coins you can add, and a form field where they can add in the number of coins that they want to add in, and then we'll have a submit button. So that's what's going to go in the onPressed. And so let's actually work that out right now. We're going to say navigator.push, and it's going to take in a context and material page route. And material page route has a builder that has a context, which then calls our addView. Unfortunately, though, we have not yet created the addView class, so it may not like this. So what we need to do is we need to go here to our addView, and we need to say stateful widget, and we're going to call it addView. And for now, it's just going to display a text. addView. We will come back to this next, and we will be modifying this. And I'm going to replace that container with the material widget. Okay, going back to our home view, it's no longer getting upset about that. So our onPressed is good to go. So now all we have to do is customize what is within the floating action button that the user sees. In our case, we want just a simple plus button. That's kind of the uniform add button. So we're going to go ahead and say child is equal to icon. We can say icons.add. Color of the icon will be white. And let's give it a background color of blue. Okay, I believe that's all we want to do there. Okay, so this is all looking good. We haven't quite hooked up our API method yet. Remember, we're working out the UI first, and then we'll go to that. Let's go over to our addView, and let's just shell out this addView really quickly. So what we're going to do within the addView is there's a couple of state variables that we need to establish. We need to establish the list of different options that the user can select from, and we need to create a string variable that's going to be equal to the value that the user has selected. In addition to that, we're going to need a text editing controller to be listening to and to capture the text input that the user puts for their number. So what we're going to do here is, in place of this text, we're going to have a column. Okay, that's our base widget that we're working with. And we're going to have 3 elements. We're going to have our drop-down button, our container, that is our input container, and then we're going to have a button. And the button's really easy because we've already created a clean button on our authentication page for login. So we'll probably just copy that button over and save us a lot of time. But let's go ahead and work on the drop-down button first. The first thing we need to do before we can create that widget is we need to create the list of strings that we want to display. So I'm going to call this coins, and I'm going to set it equal to a list of 3 coins. We're going to have Bitcoin, we're going to have Tether, and let's have Ethereum. There we go. So these are our coins. We're then going to have a drop-down value that's equal to Bitcoin. We're just going to default it to Bitcoin, first one on the list. Now let's go down, let's do one more thing, I'm sorry. Text editing controller, we'll call this amount controller. It's equal to text editing controller, just default it to that. Okay, now we can add in our drop-down button. So let's go drop-down button. And the drop-down button has a couple of elements. We have our value, which is going to be set to our drop-down value. And what this will do is whenever the user selects a new value in the drop-down, it will set, well, we are going to set the value of this drop-down value variable to the newest selected value, which will in turn update the displayed value on that drop-down. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we need to have our onChange method. So onChange has a value. Whoops. So what we want to do here is we want to say, or let's specify it's a string. What we want to do here is we want to basically just do a set state. So we say set state, and we want to set drop-down value is equal to value. And like we just mentioned, we're going to replace the value of drop-down value with the recently selected one, and that'll in turn update our drop-down button. That's our onChanged. Now the only thing left is our items field. So we've already listed out our items. You see here it's expecting a list of drop-down menu items. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do coins, which is the name of the list of different available coins that we provided. Then we're going to say .map, and we're going to say drop-down menu item. And it's drop-down menu item of type string. So we're going to add on that, close the bracket. Then we're going to have a method in here that has an input of type string value. Okay. We've got to be very careful with our commas and our closing brackets and make sure everything's working well. Okay. And then what we're going to do, and this isn't, oh, that needs to be a lowercase. Okay. Then what we're going to do in here is we're going to say return drop-down menu item, type string, and it's going to have 2 variables. We have our value, and we have our child, which we're just going to keep it simple and just do text and display value for that text, and close that with a semicolon. I believe that's it. We're going to test it here in a bit and see for sure if we got that right. But so what we're doing is we're mapping out the different values in our list. For each value, we're creating a drop-down menu item. And the drop-down menu item, we can customize it however we want, but in our case, we're just going to keep it a simple text that displays the value that we're looking at. So it'll say Bitcoin, Tether, and Ethereum, just a simple list with text fields. Or not fields, they're just text widgets. Okay, so that's all I want for the drop-down button. The next thing is pretty simple. We've done it already before. We're going to do a text form field. Now, we're going to constrain this one to a container. That way we can, if you remember when we did our first one on our authentication page, we haven't put any padding on it yet, and so it goes edge to edge and it looks a little funky. So we're going to change that for this one, and we're going to give it a width, and we're going to say media query .of context .size .width divided by 1.3, and then we're going to give a child of text form field. In that text form field, we have our controller already set up, which is a mount controller. Perfect. We're going to give it a decoration of type input decoration. And the reason for that is so that we can give it a label. And the label is going to say how much of this coin, let's keep it simple, coin amount. And I won't mess with the styling. We'll just keep it simple in this one. If you'd like to spruce it up yourself, have at it. Be a great practice in working on your styling skills and your widget formatting skills. Okay, and I think that's all we want to do. Be really simple. Maybe we'll add a keyboard. Text input type dot number with options. Let's do, actually, I'm going to keep it text. I can't remember if number allows you to do decimals or not. I think it might restrict it kind of like a phone number. So we're going to just keep it as, and actually, let's just remove that entirely. We don't really care for that right now. Maybe we'll go back and style that a little bit more later. And as I mentioned, in our authentication page, we've already created a button. So let's take this material button here. Whoa, okay. Whoops, too much. There we go. Copy that. Exit out of that, close that guy. Paste. Instead of register, we're going to say add. And in this is where we're going to call our Firestore method for adding. But we haven't set that up yet, so we're not going to worry about that quite yet. Okay, so we've got our three fields, our dropdown, our coin amount, and our button for adding. And after this, we need to say navigator.of context.pop. And what that'll do is it'll remove this material widget from the screen and bring us back to the original screen that we were on, which is home view. Okay, I'm going to start this up and let's check it out. Okay, so it's built, and let's go ahead and log in. And we're going to come back to this. I don't like the styling whatsoever. Too spaced out, not enough padding. This text, the black when everything else is white, it's a little funky. So we're going to come back to this as soon as we finish testing and getting this right, and clean this up just a little bit. Log in. Okay, this looks good. There's nothing to display, so I'm not very surprised. We'll have to check it out once we're starting working with data, and maybe we'll have to modify it a little bit and clean it up. But for now, this is great. We've got our floating action button. Let's see if it navigates us. Okay, and we're throwing an error. Type mapped list iterable is not a subtype of type list. Okay, so that'd be here in our add view, and I'm assuming it's this method right here. We are missing .toList. Let's go get ahead and give this a hard restart. Log in one more time. And let's see if it works this time around. Perfect. Okay, and I'm just realizing we can't see the drop-down menu because it's hidden behind this. So let's go up, and for a column, let's give it a main axis alignment of center. Give it a quick restart. Don't need to restart the whole app. Okay, this is looking good. This is how we want it to look. Okay, if I pull open the keyboard in the emulator, this will work. Maybe we'll tinker with the other keyboard types later. And we got add, and add for now just pops you, nothing more. Okay, so that's good. I'm gonna close that down. And let's go back really quick to our authentication page. And let's clean this up. Like I was mentioning earlier, there's a couple things I didn't like. So the first thing to do is the white. We want to make it white, not black. So I believe that all we need to do is this. Done. Okay. First thing that was bugging me, taken care of. The next thing that was bugging me is the fact that these text form fields went end to end. I want to put some constraints so that they're less. So what we're going to do is we're going to just cut them. We're going to place them inside of a container widget. And we're going to give that container widget a width of media query context.size.width divided by 1.3. And we're going to do the same thing for the first one. We are going to say child. Let's take the widget width from that one and paste it into this one. Let's change this to center instead of space between. And then let's just put some size boxes for now. Let's do media query .of context size.height divided by 35. That should be good. Just like a nice, decent padding. Nothing too crazy. Put them between all of our objects so they aren't smushed on top of each other. And I think we're good. Okay, we're going to give this another run and let's see how those improvements look. Okay, this is looking substantially cleaner than what we originally had. So let's go ahead, just do this one more time. Yep, that looks great. I'm going to remove this keyboard for my own sake. Log in. Everything is looking good. Okay, let's close this down. And let's shift over to our API methods and our Flutterfire methods. So we're going to start with our Flutterfire methods first, and we're going to be doing something interesting with our add method. So we're not necessarily just creating a new document. We're potentially updating at the same time. So we need to know what is the current value that's inside of that document. And we want to potentially add onto that value if it exists. So the way that we can do this with Firestore is something called transactions. So what we're going to do is we're going to run a transaction, and essentially we're going to be opening up a document in Firestore. We're going to be reading the current value if it exists, and then we're going to be adding onto that value. And this way we can easily increment the number of coins that a user has. So let's say I add 1 Bitcoin today. I come back tomorrow and I add 0.02 of a Bitcoin. Now I don't want to replace the document with 0.02. I want to add on to the existing 1 so that the document reads 1.02. The transaction is going to help us do this. So what we're first going to do is we're going to create a future method, and I'm just going to make it a Boolean, and we're going to say add coin. And the reason for it being a Boolean is this is just a simple way of telling the client, hey, it worked or it didn't work. So we're going to turn true if it did, false if it didn't. Because we're not necessarily needing any data on the front end from it. All we want to know is, was it successful in adding or not? So we need 2 variables that we're going to be using for this add coin. I thought about it at first and thought about utilizing a coin class, but it's really not real. I thought about using a coin class at first, but it kind of felt like we were pushing it a little bit when all we really needed were a couple of simple variables. So what we're first going to do is we're going to have string ID, and this is going to be the ID of the document that we're going to be referencing. And in the case that the document doesn't exist, this will be the name of the new document that we're creating. And then we're going to have another value called amount, which is also going to be of type string. The user, when they input that number, it's going to be a text string. We're not going to bother on the front end worrying about formatting into a nice double. We're going to handle that here in this method instead. So we're passing it in as a string. And of course, because this is a future method and we are working with Firebase, there is going to need to be an asynchronicity to this method. The next thing we want to do is we're going to do a try-catch statement. Whoa. Okay. And if we fail, if the try isn't successful and it catches an exception, we're going to return false because it was unsuccessful in adding to the database. And then what we're going to do is inside the try, we're going to say string UID, because we first need to access the document of the user before we can even think about accessing the documents for the coins. So we say string UID is equal to firebase auth.instance.current-user.uid. This will give us the UID of the current authenticated user. We're then going to say var value is equal to double.parse amount. So we're taking our string and converting it into a double. And if we have more time, this is another thing that you can do in your free time. You can add some validation to ensure that the string that's coming in is of a type double. Or simply, we can add some validation logic to the front end on the add button to where we don't allow them to add until they format their number correctly. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say document reference. And what this is going to be is we're going to set this equal to the reference of the document that we want to update. So it's going to basically be collection user, document users UID, collection coins, document the coin ID. And that is going to be the path that we're giving this document reference object. So we're going to say firebase firestore .instance .collection users, sorry about that, collection.users.doc UID .collection coins .doc ID. Okay, so that is our document reference. And the reason we need to grab that is this is the crucial part of the transaction method that we're going to be using. So now we're going to say firebase firestore .instance .run transaction. And it's going to be, instead of this, okay, it's going to be a method. And it needs to be asynchronous. Okay. And we're going to say document snapshot. We're going to call it snapshot is equal to await transaction, which is the value that run transaction produced for us. Transaction.get, and then we want to pass in our document reference. Okay. Okay. Making good progress here. So now that we have our snapshot, it's essentially a capture of the data within that document. We can say if snapshot.exists. So this means if there's not any data, like not necessarily not any data, but if not exists. Essentially what this means is this document does not exist already. Like the user has not created a document for this coin yet. So let's say we're adding Bitcoin and the user's never had Bitcoin in their profile, it'll hit this clause. Okay. So what we want to do here is we want to set a new document because just because it didn't exist doesn't mean we don't want it to exist. We want it to exist with our new value. We just don't want to, there's no other logic that needs to be put into play. It's not like we're adding an old value as well. So we're going to say document reference dot set. And in here, we can set amount equal to, and we called it value. And then we can return false. Actually, we can return true. I'm sorry about that. Don't know what I'm thinking. Then we can say double new amount. So if the document already exists, we want to first create the new value that we're going to update the document with. So we want to say snapshot.data, and then we want to take the amount from that data, and just for sake of consistency, I'm going to replace that with single quotes, plus value. And then we are going to say transaction.update. And this is important. We want to make sure we say update, and we list what do we want to update, what document, pass in our document reference, which we establish here. So we want to update this document. And then we want to say what is it that we want to update within that document. We want to update amount, and we want the value to equal new amount. Then we can say return true. Okay. And before we do a semicolon close on this run transaction, we can say, actually, we can leave it at that. You could do a .then clause to basically say successfully updated, but we don't care. We're returning true and letting the user know, hey, all is good in the world. Okay, so that is adding. So let's go ahead and hook this up to our add view. So right here, we want to say await, and what did we call this method? We called it add coin. Add coin. And add coin takes in two variables. The first one is going to be drop-down value, and the second one is going to be our amount controller. And we need to import our Flutterfile file. Okay, that's looking good. Now let's go ahead and give this another run and see if our stream builder displays the coin once we've added it, and also make sure that it's actually even adding the coin in the first place. Okay, let's go ahead and log in. Okay, we currently have nothing. We can confirm that. Go to add. Let's add Ethereum. Let's do that. I'm going to say we're going to add 1.2 of Ethereum. We've added it. Okay, now I'm a little concerned because I'm not seeing anything show here. Okay, so you can see here that it is inserting the coin into the database. But as we saw here, nothing is showing. So what we're going to do is we're going to run one more test. Let's add 1 Bitcoin, add it. Okay. And let's go ahead and close this down. Run it again. And while we're waiting for this to pull up, let's go ahead and check out our home view and see maybe if we can find out what we are missing. Document.id, document.data amount, we're returning to list, there's no errors, we're mapping the data, there's no circular progress indicator, so we know that we are getting something, some kind of response. Let's check out add view really quick, and let's see what, or not add view, let's check out our Flutterfire. There we go, here's our issue. So the problem is that we gave a bad reference. We were saying lowercase users, but on our home view, we were looking at the collection with an uppercase U. So Firebase is case sensitive, so this is a very common thing that can happen. So you want to always be sure that you're using consistency among titles. I always do uppercase camel case with all my collections. And that way I just remember it's always uppercase, camel case, don't even have to think about it. So what we're gonna do here, we're gonna restart it. I'm gonna go ahead to Firebase, and let's go ahead and sure enough, you can see here, users is lowercase. I'm gonna delete this collection just to reset my data. Okay. And let's go ahead and check out this again. Let's see if we got it right this time. Log in. Let's add 1 Bitcoin. Awesome. Bitcoin 1. Let's add in 0.0003 of Bitcoin. Add. Awesome. Now, I do want to cap it. I don't want it to be so long. I want to cap it at, say, 2 decimal places, because I think what we'll do is we'll say, what we're going to do is we're going to represent this as a price. So we're going to say this times whatever the current price is. And so we will have to cap this, the decimal places. That's one thing we need to keep in mind. But so far it's looking good. Let's do another one. Let's do Tether as well. Let's say 54 Tether. Okay, awesome. And you can see here it's starting to create a list. So the next thing we're going to do is let's hook up to our API. Let's get that live pricing added in, and then we can do a little bit more styling here, and we'll be off to the races. So let's go ahead and close this down. Okay, so here's the API that we're going to be working with. It's CoinGecko.com. They have a free, open to the public API that you can utilize. Unless you're using this for commercial purposes and really pinging it a lot, it should be perfectly fine to use. So for our case, where we're going to have a low amount of users, we're not expecting a ton of people, this is going to be just fine. So we have this GET request. It takes in an ID of a coin. The way that CoinGecko does their IDs, I've already looked into this a little bit. It's the name of the coin. So we have Bitcoin, Tether, Ethereum. So the ID that we have in our documents, we can utilize that for this API call as well. Hence why we stuck with the lowercase coin name for the ID and everything. It flows well working with the API. So what we're going to do here is let's go ahead and test it out. So let's click try it out. We're going to pass Bitcoin. Click execute. Okay. Awesome. And you can see here, here's the data we're getting back. Now the only data we really care about is the price. So let's look down, let's see here. This is description in different languages. Okay, here we go. Okay, this is what we care about. Market data. Then within market data, there's a field called current price. Then within current price, there's a field USD for US dollars. So this is what we care about with this API. And this is what we're going to try to capture. So let's go back up to the top. We're going to grab this request URL. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to place it right here. And the next thing that we're going to do is we need to import the HTTP library. In order to do that, I believe I've already done this on this project, but we're going to go to our pubspec.yaml file. Yep. And you are going to add in HTTP under dependencies. Just place it right with your other Flutterfire dependencies, or just under. And then you're going to use the latest version, which as of date of this video, it's 12.2. Okay. Yes. Okay. So we've now got that. Let's import HTTP. And we're going to say as HTTP. And then we're going to say future double, and we need to import one more thing. Oh. Thinking. Yeah, there it is. The convert library. Okay, future double. We'll call it get price. And it takes in an ID. Okay. So we're returning a double, which is the price that the user is asking for. Okay, so the way that this works is we're going to do a try catch. cover our bases here. If we catch an error, we're just going to print the error to the console, and we're going to return 0. And so if you see that the current value of a coin is 0, then you know that you probably did something wrong. Okay. And we're just going to print the error to the console if we catch an error. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to say var URL is equal to, and let's go ahead and copy this URL, paste it. And the reason I'm leaving off the ending is we're going to add on ID to the URL. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we want to say var response is equal to http.get URL. And what this will do is it'll perform a GET request as if we were working at a Postman or putting this URL API into the browser. It's essentially doing that, and it's setting the response of that object to this variable called response. We're then going to have a variable called JSON, which we're going to say JSON to code, and it's going to say response.body. So what we're doing is with the, okay, why doesn't it like this? Response.body, that was incomplete, that's why. Okay, so what we're doing with this is we're saying, take your response object, and with your response object, I want to take the body element, and I want to format it in JSON format. And what we can do with this is we can then say value is equal to JSON, and I believe it was called market data. Let's confirm. Yep, market data. Oh, not dot. I want to do another one of these. It's called current price. Current price. USD. And let's just, for consistency's sake, we don't want to trust the API to make the correct decision with formatting, so we can trust ourselves. So we're going to format it as a string, and then we're going to say return double.parse of value. And the reason I say that is I've seen APIs before that are poorly managed and kept, and sometimes they'll return a double, sometimes they'll return a string, sometimes they'll return an int, and it can cause a lot of problems if you're not ready for that. So I find it best just to take matters in my own hand, make sure we have a uniform string that we're reading, and then do with the string as we want afterwards. So what this will do is this will return the price of the coin that we're dealing with. So now what we want to do, we're done with add view. We're going to go back to our home view, and we're going to manipulate this a little bit. Okay, so the way that we're going to work with this data is we're going to do the following. We're going to say double Bitcoin is equal to 0.0. Do the same for Ethereum and for Tether. Then we're going to override our init state. And what we're going to do is we're going to say get values. And then we're going to have get values be asynchronous. And the reason for this, you can't do asynchronous methods within an init state. So we're going to create a simple method that's called add init state to go and grab the newest values for each of these coins. And we're going to say Bitcoin is equal to get price of Bitcoin. This needs to be a weight. And we're going to do the same thing for Ethereum. And for tether, then we're going to call set state just to make sure those get set. Okay. Okay, so what we're doing is when the page initially loads, we're going to go ahead and call our API method and get the current price for each of these 3 coins that the user could potentially show. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have another method within our widget that's going to be called get value, but this one's going to have parameters. It's going to have ID, and it's going to have a double of type amount. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say if ID is equal to Bitcoin, return Bitcoin times amount. Else, if ID is equal to Ethereum, return Ethereum times amount. And otherwise, it must be Tether, so return Tether times amount. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're going to be calling this from within our individual rows to get the current price. And so we're going to say, okay, get the current price of Bitcoin and multiply it by whatever amount that you're passing me that the user owns of that. And so we're going to say, pass the coin you're looking at, and we're going to check and see which one it is. And then we're going to multiply the current price of that coin by the amount of that coin that the user owns. So utilizing this method, we're going to go down here into our stream builder, go into our list view, and for amount owned, we are now going to say get value. Oh my goodness, I'm having trouble here. It's going to be document.id, and then the second variable is the amount of that coin. Okay. We want to put a $sign in front of it, and we want to say .toString, or let's do toFixed, or that's what it is, toString as fixed, and let's go to 2 decimal places. So this will make sure that if our number that we get back, our double, has like 2 plus, like it could have like 5 decimal places, we want to make sure we only show 2 so it looks like a legitimate number. And keep in mind that this is in US dollars. If you'd like to use a different currency, you can look at the API documentation. You can figure out which one is represents your country. So for example, we have the euro. I believe Canada's in here, CAD. It has pretty much every common, well-known currency on here that it can compare to. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this out and make sure that it is giving us the proper price. And so we're going to run this, and while we're running it, we're going to go ahead and check out Firestore really quick, give it a refresh. And let's see roughly what we think it should equal. So we have 108 Tether coins. Let's see, Tether to $. Okay, 1 Tether is about $1. So we should see about 108 for Tether. And for Bitcoin, we have, okay, let's see, 1 Bitcoin price. And we should see 10,800 to 10,900, somewhere in there for Bitcoin. Let's pull up in our emulator. Let's log in. Awesome, perfect. Not exact. Well, actually, what do I know? I was given a rough estimate, but it looks like that's correct. Like that's the amount that we want to have. So the last thing we need to do is let's go ahead and give these some styling, and then maybe we can even add in like a X icon. And if they hit it, then we just sell everything. We just clear out that coin just so you can get familiar with how to delete things from a document. Okay. And going over really quickly, when it comes to deleting, if you want to allow the user to delete up to a certain amount, like I just want to sell half of my Bitcoin, what you're going to do is you're going to do something similar to the transaction that we did with adding coins, but instead of adding onto, you will subtract the amount that you want to do from that coin. So it's a very similar method. For this example, just to wrap it up and make it concise, we're going to just say delete all. So let's manipulate this container here. So the first thing we can do is we can give it some decoration. Give it a box decoration. We can do a border radius, dot circular, let's do 15. We can do unique coloring, so we can say color is equal to colors.blue. We can do, let's do some text styling here. Let's say text style color is equal to colors.white. And let me go here. And again, I'm going to be putting all of this code, I'll be putting all this code online. And so if you have any questions or you want to slow it down a little bit and get a better feel for it, you can always go back and check out that code. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot the key part of styling is the style tag. I was wondering why I was getting a little error there. Okay. That's good. We're gonna wrap this whole thing. So container, we've given it a width. Have we? We have not given it a width. Oh, we have. No, we haven't. Okay. Sorry for the back and forth. Let's give it a width. Let's give it a height. Give it a hot reload. I'm sorry, I meant restart, hot restart. Okay, looks good. Now all we need is some padding. Let's do container, return padding. Child is container. And padding the edge insets dot vertical dot only top 5. Looks good. I'm still slightly confused as to why this isn't working the way I want it to. The sizing isn't how I want it. Let's do this instead. Let's do left 15, right 15. Okay. That looks good. That looks good to me. Okay, let's go ahead and add that button. Button, I'm sorry. My mouth is getting a little dry. Okay, let's go ahead and add that button. And what I'm going to do to create a little bit more room, I'm going to delete this. I think it's pretty self-explanatory when you see the $sign. And I don't think we need to include name. So what we're trying to do is we're just trying to free up a little bit more space to include that button. And we're going to have an icon here. Icons.close, maybe? I'm not 100% sure what that icon looks like. And then we're going to say colors.red. And actually, now that I think about it, we need an icon button. Okay. On pressed. Let's just print something so we can test it. Okay. I'm going to say space between. Just make it a little bit cleaner. That looks good. We want some spacing on the left of those coins, and we want it up the font size. So first, font size. Let's say 18. And add in that padding on the left. So the way we can do this is we can just put a size box of type width 5.0, just the left of that first item. Reload it, look at it, looks good to me. So we've got that padding on the left, the X's will always be on the right. Let's see if that was printing or not. Output, terminal. There we go, debug console, that was what I was looking for. Let's try this again. Okay, that's good. So now we can move on to our remove method. So let's go back to our Flutterfire. Let's create a future method. Type bool, and we'll call it remove. And we'll pass in an ID. And we're going to say remove coin, actually. So what we're first going to do is we want to get the user's UID. So we've already done this up above. Get the current UID of the user. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say Firebase Firestore dot instance dot collection users dot doc UID dot collection, and we're going to say once again coins dot doc ID, and then we're going to say dot delete. And what this will do is it will delete that document from our list. Okay, so now all we have to do is we need to reference it. Oh, I'm sorry. And return true. Now all we have to do is go back to our home view. Within our icon button, we can say async, and then we were just going to say await, or we called it remove coin. And we want to specify the coin we want to remove, which is going to be document.data. Actually, not even .data, document.id. And then we need to import our Flutterfire into this page, into this Dart file. Okay. We're going to do a hard restart, and we're going to try this on our Tether coin. Okay, it's gone from our list, but let's double check and make sure it truly removed it. And it looks like it did. Now let's try it with Bitcoin. Let's go back to Firebase, and it removed Bitcoin as well. Awesome. Let's go ahead and just add in. Perfect. Okay. So we've successfully completed our crypto wallet. Clearly, there's always a lot of other things that you can do with this. If you'd like to challenge yourself a little bit more, I would suggest doing the following things. 1, incorporate some more advanced business logic state management into the app. 2, establish some classes and work on API usage and improving how you utilize responses. And 3, work on the styling. You can never learn too much when it comes to Flutter styling. I hope that this is a good app to break you in and get you comfortable working with Firestore, Firebase authentication, and basic API usage. It's really not as hard as some people make it out to be. I hope that you felt the same way doing this tutorial with me. Once again, I'd like to thank FreeCodeCamp for giving me the opportunity to teach you guys and show you guys how to utilize Firebase in your Flutter application. And as always, I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for joining me.